So CF Music, and this is a crazy Kid Chameleon song. Kid Chameleon is part of a song cover request playlist I'm doing for a buddy of mine, my buddy Battleship. And one of them applies these concepts that could basically make this an expansion on my previous video in detail. However, I didn't come up with the brilliant comment that I'm going to read from, but I'm going to actually break the comment down even more and explain what's going on here. So I love this comment. I replied to it, but I deleted it because something was inaccurate. So before I read anything, I'm going to tell you what my opinion is. My opinion is, as the people who know me, I am of the belief philosophically that why make it more complicated than it has to be unless you absolutely have to. So I'm of the belief, right, that it's 4/4 time signature, and I'm going to prove it in this video. So let's listen to it real quick. So it's basically, that's the idea, and it expands a little bit. That's the basic rhythm. Now it's 4/4 because for the beginners of the people that don't know, what 4/4 time signature means is the top number is the amount, the bottom number is the value. So 4/4 means 4 quarter notes. Just a quick point to make it clear. So a commenter says, does anyone know the time signature for the song? Now this is by the user AlphaChrome713 or AlphaChrome713. This was about a year ago. 4 months late, but this was an interesting thing for me to think about. So here's my excessive answer. Short answer, it's basically 4/4 because the offbeats correct themselves. That's exactly how I would explain it. The medium answer, it could be 4/4/3/5, 4/4, and then you'd have to break it down smaller to 16th notes, 17/15. So 17 16th notes, 15 16th notes, and that would be like each one. Repeat. But each time signature change only lasts for one measure, and the next measure compensates for that change anyway, so it's debatable. So what he's saying is, if you wanted to really know and absolutely break it down and like you don't have any other choice, if you wanted to be perfectly specific, this is how you would do it in the medium answer, accounting for the fact that you have to break it down smaller than quarter notes and smaller than eighth notes. So it's the slightest change, but I guess that's what it would be if you went every measure: 4/4/3/5, 4/4, and then 17/15. Long answer, the song is trying to accent offbeats a lot, like it's tripping over itself, but for the most part it fits with a 4/4 time signature at slightly under 118 beats per minute. I use an online metronome, and 117 and change seem to fit best from what I tried. So the accented offbeats make the first 4 measures sound like they could be 4, 4, 3, and 5. But I'm reluctant to say it's actually 2 changes in time signature because the changes only last for a single measure, and they both effectively cancel each other out and end up being the same length as they would be if they were both 4/4. That's exactly how I would explain. It's the same amount anyway, so just reduce it down to the most basic thing: 4/4, like wherever possible. You know what I mean? Where, in other words, what he's saying is you don't have to break it down to 16ths because it's just the same amount that it would be. So, okay, I can just undo that and move on. It's only when you really need to know, you would have to break it down as small as you could go to find it. Also, the guitar from 17 to 25 keeps the same rhythm through these bars, through these supposedly different time bars, supporting my claim that the time signature doesn't actually change here, right? So this takes like cerebral coordination to do, because you essentially, and that's where when I prove it, you'll know what I'm talking about, because you have to essentially ignore the other stuff and just do what you're trying to do, otherwise it's easy to fall off the wagon. The section between 14 and 17 after the first 4 measures sounds very offbeat because of the subtle 16th note that pushes, so to speak, the next 5 to 8 notes forward by a quarter of a beat. Once again, the section between 14 and 17 sounds very offbeat because of the subtle 16th note that pushes the next 5 to 8 notes forward by a quarter of a beat. So this unsteady beat is corrected by another 16th note, and the last 2 notes of that measure fit nicely with the 4/4 time signature that the next measure has, right? So it just fits both easily, which is just before another debatable 3/4 to 5/4, like in the beginning at the start. So he's saying it does it again. The first note makes this portion sound more awkward, even more awkward, because usually a lone 16th note wouldn't push the rest of the measure, right? We would expect it to be at the end of the previous beat or measure to lead up to the 8th notes, or we would expect multiple 16th notes together to fill the whole beat. So he's saying we would expect something that sounds a little bit more practical, like to what you could tell what was going on because there was just more notes in the phrase, right? So what he's saying is, and what I'm saying too, is it's already got an awkward vibe, but it's even more so because the way that we're accustomed to hearing most things is like you would just assume that the 16th note would be in a logical spot, like right at the end of the previous one. But it throws you off even more because of this, because they're taking advantage in a clever way of that lone 16th note, so that it almost creates the illusion like it's pushing the whole rest of it forward, but might not necessarily be doing that. So you're getting the feel and the vibe of it without actually changing it. You know, just the stylistic trick. Now, wait till you see what he says. Continuing, the long pause, this is key. The long pause is key here. The long pause after the previous melodic notes makes us not notice that we would be skipping a 16th of a measure by assuming this, by assuming what he said before, that it would be in a logical spot. So once again, the long pause after the previous notes makes us not notice that we would be skipping a 16th of a measure by assuming that, which of course catches up to us when the song corrects itself with the second 16th note. So there's like something clever going on within that long pause. That's why the pause is key. It's within that long pause where they can disguise it, whatever they're doing. So you might not necessarily, according to your internal clock, it's just going to throw it off because it's just an empty space. So that's where they cleverly hit it. So continue. I'm reluctant to say these next four measures change their time signatures for the same reason I don't think the first four changed, except this time it's even less of a deviation than before. However, if you want the time signatures to change each measure, it could be interpreted as 4 and then 4, 17 and then 50. So he's saying if you really wanted to measure it for each measure, you could write it like that. But what I'm saying is the whole thing is in 4/4, and it's just simulating all of this. And you could, if you wanted to, break it up. But that's like why this is an expansion of the previous video, where I delve into it in depth here, because those are the things that would throw you off. Those are the things that would confuse you and make you think it was the time signature that was different, not the notes being played. So the time signature is 4/4, and it's not, it doesn't change. But what the artist and musician did is write the music in such a fashion that it could skip past you and make you think that without it ever changing from 4/4, just because the way everything fits perfectly equal with it. It's exactly equivalent. The space of time that events are having, the space of time is exactly identical and equivalent. So the question remains, do you even need to break it down that much? And could it just be 4/4 the whole time? So in conclusion, since the song more or less repeats the same 8-measure rhythmic pattern, the time signature quote changes that are later on in the track are the same. If you think that syncopation is just a fun technique you can do to throw people off, then the song is in 4/4 completely. That's what I'm saying. And it's just a cool trick you can do to simulate it, whether it's like rhythmic displacement or whatever. Syncopation. But if you think it justifies using different time signatures, then the time signatures are 4 and then 4, 3, 5, 4, 4. So watch, let's count it as perfectly 4/4 right now using my cerebral coordination powers, right? It's like using my cerebral coordination skills. It just staying perfectly precision 4/4 quarter notes and completely ignoring everything else. So I'm either doing that, or I'm like subdividing my brain into, I'm either doing what I'm doing and ignoring everything else as the perfect way to guarantee I'm on time, or I'm dividing my brain. But either way, we're going to count 4/4 right now. So 2 quick caveats that I have to explain real quick. Unfortunately, as it says here, please be aware there's a slight delay from the sound of the screen recorder, causing the loud one to be sounded on too. Meaning that when I watched it back with the screen recorder, my voice counting it between 1, 2, 3, 4 was delayed by the sound recorder recording the video. So there was a latency. So the first point is that you hear what's supposed to be on the 1 on the 2 in the video. And then as far as my voice, I had to opt for a website that shows between 1, 2, 3, 4 and not use the voice sound. Let's check it out. So you see what I mean? What he's saying is it takes up the same amount of total space, ultimately, right? So the real question is, again, do you even need to break it down measure by measure if it's just 4/4 the entire time and that works and it all lines up and everything's fine? Or is it actually every measure is a different freaking time signature? No, it's not. But if you wanted to write it out that way, just because you wanted to figure it out, you could do that. And if you had to, it would be 17 16th notes, meaning one extra one of that value. And then it compensates by being one less. So it's 17 is one over, and then it's 15 is one less. So that it zeroes out, bro. You know what I mean? So it's not a matter of inches. It's not a matter of time signatures. It's not a matter of every bar, and like all this like polymeter stuff. It's just 4/4. But you see how you can throw it off. So the question I would find interesting as a songwriter and an artist is like, how long do they make the particular like each idea? How long do you make it, and then it's sort of like the next idea How long is each idea within the totality of the total amount of time? How many ideas are in it? And like in other words, how many measures does it take to cycle all the way back around to one, to where it's the entire song basically before the entire song repeats again? You see what I mean? And then it'll make a little 2-minute video. So how many times does the entire idea go? And then how many times does each idea in the song last? And then that's just interesting to look at, like, exactly what spot did they throw it off with the clever trick? You know what I'm saying? But it's like crazy ass mathematics, you know? And it's the most fun part about it. And there was no guitarist that was ever going to tell me this. It was really only drummers, if anything. Like, it wasn't no piano, it wasn't singers, it wasn't violin, it wasn't any of the instruments I played that could have told me about. But, like, in a weird way, you would think so. But maybe it was, like I said, it was just circumstantial of the people that were around me where I grew up. You know, I'm not saying, like, if I went to school or college or something after the fact and then just mingled with people that they wouldn't know this or anything. I'm just talking about the early stages of my development as a musician from day one. It just so happened that nobody knew about it. And like, you would think it's complex, and yeah, they are. But really, it's the very basics of music theory where, like, it's almost like, how do you not know about this if you're a drummer? How do you not really, like, have ever come across this as somebody that claims to be a songwriter, right, and has this crazy big discography and catalog? How would you never have heard of syncopation before? How would you have never heard? It's really like day one music theory. If you in other words, what I'm saying is it's complex and it's just basic music theory. But why do I feel the need to highlight that it's just basic shit, even though it's complex? Because all the guitarists that play not drums, it's guitar, so you actually have, like, music notes that have a sound, and you're writing music and composing. What were they creating? Like, what were they writing? What was the music? That was the issue for me, you know. So a lot of us, me, myself included, a lot of us as guitarists just copy it. Like in the beginning, we're just learning it through osmosis. We're not all having, like, formal training and formal education. We're not all starting like that. There's no, like, thing like that, unless your parents had extra disposable income, which ours didn't, and they could get you one of these, like, rock schools or lessons or something. We didn't have nothing. Like, we went on ultimateguitar.com and learned from guitar tablets and shit, or we just tried to figure it out on the straight. Like, so in other words, like, why would I expect them to know this, you know? But it's not about, like, I'm better than. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that I play 5 or 6 different instruments and those guys play 1 or 2. So I was just on a different path, and that's all it's about. It's not like, look at me bragging rights. I'm saying these facts to try to actually make a bigger point. I'm trying to make a point, and people hear the things and trigger the defense mechanism and take it out of context. It's like, no, I'm saying that to try to actually make a point. And they're just facts, so whatever. But the point I'm trying to make is, it's just a different calling in music, and I wanted to learn more instruments to be dynamic and versatile as a songwriter. I can just do as many things as I needed. If there was ever a time where I needed to do it, I could. So I was just trying to learn everything I could from everything. The same way Bruce Lee says, philosophically, absorb what's useful, discard what's useless, and add what's essentially your own. Now, once again, that's a philosophy, not advice that, or like claiming that it's the attitude you should have if you were entering into formal education. No, I don't think you should I think you should listen to what they say, because that's why you're there. And learn everything you can, respect everything you can. Just the reason I include the philosophical lens of it is because I'm just an artist and a songwriter, and that doesn't have any education. There's no education in how to be creative in songwriting, which is why I would feel like justified in having a different philosophy. So when you're talking about songwriting, that's one whole world, and then you've got this stuff and theory and all that, and it's great. They're both great, but it's kind of like the theory never helped me write music, but writing music eventually led me to this theory anyway.